Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the window of his command center and watched the sky burn. The alien ships had appeared 3 hours ago, filling the space above Earth like a dark cloud of metal and death. He had seen many battles in his 40 years of service, but nothing like this. The enemy fleet stretched across the horizon, 50,000 warships hanging in the void like predators waiting to strike. Dr. Lisa Grant rushed into the room, her face pale with fear. She carried a data pad filled with alien communications that her team had been trying to decode since first contact. The message was simple and terrible. The Zephyrian Confederation demanded Earth's complete surrender within 72 hours. If humanity refused, every living thing on the planet would die. Morrison turned from the window to face the emergency council. Senator Claire Watson sat at the head of the table, her hands shaking as she read the alien ultimatum. Captain Ryan. Burke stood beside his commander, his jaw tight with anger. These aliens thought humans were weak, that they would roll over like dogs at the first sign of danger. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The alien leader called himself High Commander Vextel. His broadcast had reached every screen and radio on Earth. He spoke in perfect English, his voice cold and mechanical. The Zephyrians had conquered 847 other worlds using the same tactics. They would arrive, demonstrate their power, and demand surrender. Every species before humans had given up without a real fight. Grant pulled up images on the main screen. The aliens had destroyed Pluto to show their strength. The dwarf planet was gone, turned to space dust in seconds by weapons that seemed to tear apart matter itself. They had also wiped out 3 mining colonies in the outer system, killing 15,000 people in the blink of an eye. The message was clear. Resistance was futile. Burke stepped forward, his fists clenched. He had lost friends on those colonies, good people who died just to prove a point. The aliens thought this demonstration would break human spirit, but they had made a mistake. Humans did not break easily, and they had a long memory for those who hurt their own. Senator Watson spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. She wanted to consider surrender, to save what lives they could. The odds were impossible. 50,000 alien ships against humanity's small fleet of 200 vessels. It would be suicide to fight, she said. Better to live as slaves than die as fools. Morrison felt anger rise in his chest. He had studied the alien communications all morning, looking for weaknesses and patterns. What he found surprised him. The Zephyrians had never faced real resistance before. Every species they conquered gave up after the first show of force. They had no experience fighting a determined enemy. Grant agreed with Morrison's assessment. The linguistic patterns in the alien broadcasts showed arrogance and overconfidence. The Zephyrians believed their own propaganda about being superior to all other life forms. They had grown soft from easy victories, expecting every new enemy to fold at the first sign of trouble. Burke stood and addressed the council. He had commanded ships in 3 different wars and knew something about fighting against bad odds. Humans had one advantage the aliens did not expect. They had spent their entire history fighting each other. Every human military doctrine, every weapon system, every tactical manual was written by people who understood that war was about more than just big guns and fancy ships. Morrison walked to the tactical display and began explaining his thoughts. The Zephyrians were used to conventional warfare, fleet against fleet in open space. They expected enemies to fight by rules that made sense to civilized species. But humans were not civilized in the way aliens understood the word. Humans were survivors, adapters, and when cornered they became incredibly dangerous. The Admiral pointed to the display showing human defensive positions. Earth's fleet was small, but it was crewed by people who had trained for this moment their entire careers. Human ships were built for speed and maneuverability, designed to fight larger forces using hit-and-run tactics. The aliens had numbers, but humans had experience in asymmetric warfare. Grant revealed something else she had discovered in the alien communications. The Zephyrian Confederation was not as united as it appeared. 12 different species held, together by fear and mutual need, not loyalty or friendship. If humans could find ways to exploit those divisions, they might have a chance. Watson argued that even with all these advantages, the odds were still impossible. 50,000 ships could destroy Earth's entire fleet without breaking formation. The senator believed that surrender was the only rational choice, that someone had to think about the billions of innocent lives at stake. Morrison understood her position, but could not accept it. He had taken an oath to defend Earth and humanity, not to hand them over to alien masters. More importantly, he knew something about human nature that the aliens did not. Humans would rather die fighting than live on their knees. It was not rational. It was not logical, but it was who they were as a species. Burke volunteered to lead the first attack, knowing it would probably be his last mission. His ship, the ESS Defiance, was humanity's most advanced vessel, equipped with experimental weapons and the best crew in the fleet. If humans were going to make a statement, Burke wanted to be the one to deliver it. The debate continued for 2 hours, but Morrison had already made his decision. He would not surrender Earth to alien invaders, no matter what the cost. When Senator Watson called for a vote, Morrison stood and spoke the words that would change human history forever. He looked directly into the camera that would broadcast Earth's response to the Zephyrian fleet. His voice was calm and steady, showing no fear of the overwhelming force arrayed against his species. The message was simple and direct, spoken in the same tone humans had used to defy tyrants and oppressors throughout their long and violent history. "We reject your ultimatum," Morrison said. "Come and take it." Captain Ryan Burke watched the alien fleet advance toward Jupiter, their ships moving in perfect formation like a parade of death. 5,000 Zephyrian vessels approached his position, expecting to crush the small human force that dared to challenge them. Burke commanded only 200 ships, but he had something the aliens did not understand: the accumulated wisdom of every human who had ever fought against impossible odds. The Zephyrians moved slowly and predictably, confident in their overwhelming numbers. They had done this same maneuver 800 times before, always with the same result. The enemy would see their massive fleet, panic, and either surrender or die quickly in a hopeless battle. High Commander Vexthul had sent his subordinates to finish what he considered a minor cleanup operation. Burke smiled grimly as he watched the alien formation. They were flying straight into his trap, following textbook tactics that any human military academy student would recognize and counter. The aliens had never fought an enemy that studied war as both science and art, that learned from every conflict and adapted to every new threat. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Hayes crouched in the cargo bay of his transport ship, checking his equipment one final time. His Special Forces team had volunteered for what everyone considered a suicide mission, boarding alien vessels during active combat. Hayes had studied every piece of intelligence about Zephyrian ship design, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited by human soldiers. Dr. Peter Chang worked frantically in his mobile laboratory, trying to understand alien technology well enough to turn it against its creators. The Zephyrians used energy weapons that manipulated matter at the quantum level. Incredibly advanced, but also incredibly complex. Chang believed that complexity was a weakness that human ingenuity could exploit. Major Kate Russell sat in the cockpit of her experimental fighter, a small craft designed specifically for the kind of battle Burke was planning. Human engineers had built her ship for speed and stealth, sacrificing armor and heavy weapons for the ability to strike fast and disappear. Russell had trained her entire career for this moment, learning to fly like a hunter rather than a soldier. Alien fleet entered Jupiter's radiation belt, following the exact course Burke had predicted. The massive ships were protected against normal space hazards, but their sensors became confused in the planet's magnetic field. This was exactly what Burke was counting on: the chance to even the odds through superior knowledge of local conditions. Burke gave the signal and 200 human ships emerged from hiding places throughout the Jovian system. They had been waiting, for hours, concealed behind moons and asteroids, using every trick human military doctrine had developed over centuries of warfare. The aliens found themselves surrounded by enemies they had not seen coming. The battle began differently than any engagement in Zephyrian history. Instead of forming battle lines and exchanging fire in orderly formations, The humans attacked like a swarm of angry insects. They struck from all directions at once, targeting communications arrays and weapon systems, rather than trying to destroy entire ships. Burke wanted to blind and cripple the enemy, not necessarily kill them all. Hayes and his team launched toward the alien flagship in small boarding pods designed to look like space debris. The Zephyrians had excellent sensors, but they were not programmed to scan for human soldiers hiding inside fake asteroids. Hayes reached his target undetected, his team cutting through the alien hull with tools that Chang had modified using captured technology. Russell dove her fighter through the alien formation, her ship's stealth systems making her nearly invisible to enemy sensors. She carried a special payload that Dr. Grant had developed, thousands of data packets containing human cultural information. As Russell flew past each alien ship, she transmitted everything from human music to military history directly into their computers. The Zephyrians were shocked by what they learned about humanity. These creatures had been fighting wars continuously for over 5,000 years, studying every aspect of combat and conflict. Their military history contained detailed accounts of asymmetric warfare, psychological operations, and something the aliens had never encountered: the concept that dying in battle was preferable to living in defeat. Chang made his breakthrough during the height of the battle, discovering how to reverse the polarity of Zephyrian energy weapons. He transmitted his findings to the human fleet, and within minutes Burke's ships were firing captured alien weapons back at their original owners. The technological advantage that had won the Zephyrians 800 worlds was suddenly neutralized. Hayes found the alien command center and discovered something incredible. The Zephyrian crew was terrified. They had never experienced fear during combat because they had never faced an enemy that could hurt them. The psychological impact of actually being in danger was devastating to soldiers who expected easy victory. Hayes began sabotaging their systems from within while his team gathered intelligence about alien psychology and tactics. The battle turned into exactly what Burke had planned: a demonstration of human military evolution. His ships used tactics borrowed from every war humanity had ever fought, from ancient naval battles to modern space conflicts. They attacked supply lines, used false flag operations, and employed coordinated strikes that kept the aliens constantly off balance. Russell completed her cultural warfare mission, having transmitted human information to every ship in the alien fleet. The Zephyrians were disturbed by what they learned about human nature. These beings actually celebrated warriors who died fighting impossible odds, who chose death before dishonor, who preferred extinction to surrender. It was a completely alien concept to species that had survived by being practical and logical. Dr. Grant watched the battle from Earth, analyzing alien communications as they became increasingly panicked and confused. The Zephyrians had expected a conventional space battle that would end quickly with human defeat. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move, that turned their own tactics against them, and that showed no fear of death or defeat. The alien fleet began to retreat after losing 800 ships to Burke's much smaller force. They had never experienced anything like human military doctrine, had never faced an enemy that treated warfare as an art form to be perfected. The surviving Zephyrians sent emergency messages back to their command, reporting that humans were unlike any species they had previously encountered. Burke let them go, knowing that this first victory was just the beginning of a much longer war. He had proven that humans could fight aliens and win, but at a terrible cost. Earth's outer colonies were completely destroyed, and billions of people had died in the initial alien attacks. The price of defiance was higher than anyone had imagined. Hayes returned from his boarding mission with detailed intelligence about alien technology and psychology. The Zephyrians were physically superior to humans in many ways, but they had critical weaknesses that could be exploited. They had never developed the mental toughness that came from fighting desperate battles, had never learned to function under extreme stress. Chang distributed his technological discoveries to human research teams throughout the solar system. For the first time since the war began, human ships had weapons that could hurt alien vessels. It was not enough to guarantee victory, but it was enough to make the Zephyrians understand that conquering humanity would not be the simple task they had expected. The battle near Jupiter became known as humanity's first major victory against the aliens. But it was also the moment when both sides realized this would be a war unlike any other in galactic history. The Zephyrians had met an enemy that refused to follow the rules, and humans had discovered that survival required them to become something they had never been before, a united species fighting for its very existence. 3 months into the war, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in his underground command bunker, watching reports from battles across the solar system. The conflict had become everything the Zephyrians never expected, a prolonged war of attrition against an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Morrison smiled grimly as he read the latest intelligence reports. The aliens were beginning to understand that conquering humanity would not be the simple task they had planned. Dr. Lisa Grant had made a discovery that changed everything about how humans understood their enemy. The Zephyrian Confederation was not the united force it appeared to be. 12 different species held together by fear and mutual dependence, not friendship or shared goals. Each species had joined the Confederation to avoid being conquered, but none of them truly trusted their allies. Grant had found a way to exploit those divisions. Captain Ryan Burke had evolved human space combat into something the galaxy had never seen before. His ships no longer fought like a traditional fleet, instead operating as coordinated hunting packs that struck without warning and disappeared before the enemy could respond. The aliens had started calling human forces the Madness Fleet, because their tactics seemed to follow no logical pattern that Zephyrian computers could predict or counter. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Hayes had spent the last month infiltrating alien command structures, using captured uniforms and forged identification to move freely among enemy forces. His psychological profile of Zephyrian leadership revealed critical weaknesses that humans could exploit. The aliens had grown so accustomed to easy victories that they had no experience dealing with setbacks or prolonged resistance. Morrison revealed the truth about Earth's preparation to his senior staff. The 72-hour ultimatum had not been a surprise to human leadership. Deep space monitoring stations had been tracking the alien fleet for 2 years, giving Earth time to prepare for what everyone knew would be a fight for survival. Humanity had used that time not just to build weapons, but to restructure their entire civilization for total war. Underground cities housed 2 billion people, designed to survive planetary bombardment and maintain industrial production even if the surface was destroyed. Hidden shipyards throughout the asteroid belt continued building vessels using a combination of human engineering and captured alien technology. Supply depots buried on distant moons stockpiled everything needed to fight a war that might last decades. Dr. Peter Chang had made breakthrough discoveries about Zephyrian psychology that proved as valuable as any weapon. The aliens were physically superior to humans in many ways, but they had evolved in artificial environments that protected them from stress and hardship. Prolonged combat caused them to suffer complete psychological breakdown, something humans had learned to endure through centuries of warfare. Major Kate Russell had become the template for humanity's new combat doctrine. Her fighter squadron used tactics borrowed from every successful guerrilla war in human history, adapted for three-dimensional space combat. They struck at supply convoys, communication relays, and command ships, always avoiding direct confrontation with superior forces while inflicting maximum damage to enemy morale and logistics. Grant's psychological warfare campaign had achieved results beyond her wildest expectations. 3 of the 12 allied species in the Zephyrian Confederation had begun experiencing internal revolts as their populations learned about human concepts of individual freedom and self-determination. The idea that people could choose their own government was spreading through alien civilizations like a virus. Burke prepared for what he knew would be the decisive battle of the war. Intelligence reports indicated that the Zephyrians were bringing their entire remaining fleet to Earth for one final assault. 30,000 ships would attempt to end human resistance through overwhelming force. Burke smiled as he reviewed his defensive plans, knowing that the aliens still did not understand what they were really fighting. Hayes had captured High Commander Vexthul during a daring raid on the alien flagship. The Zephyrian leader now sat in a human detention facility, watching reports of his civilization's slow collapse. For the first time in his species' history, Vexthul was experiencing something he had never known existed: the possibility of total defeat. Morrison did not plan to meet the alien fleet in traditional combat. Earth's entire solar system had been turned into a battlefield, with hidden weapon platforms, mined space routes, and coordinated defensive positions that would force the enemy to fight on humanity's terms. The Admiral had learned from every battle humans had ever won against superior forces, and he intended to use all of that knowledge against the Zephyrians. Commander Alex Torres had spent months mapping Zephyrian homeworlds using long-range reconnaissance missions. His intelligence gathering revealed something shocking. The alien confederation was already beginning to fracture as member species realized that humans could not be easily conquered. Some worlds were withdrawing their ships from the war effort, afraid of what humanity might do if they achieved total victory. Dr. Rachel Kim had developed psychological warfare techniques that proved devastatingly effective against alien crews. Human broadcasts that seemed like random noise to most species contained subliminal messages designed specifically for Zephyrian brain patterns. Enemy crews exposed to these transmissions began experiencing nightmares, paranoia, and complete loss of confidence in their mission. Russell's fighter squadron had become legendary throughout the solar system, appearing wherever the fighting was heaviest and striking decisive blows against enemy formations. Her pilots had adopted the motto, "Death before dishonor," a concept so alien to Zephyrian thinking that enemy crews often surrendered rather than face fighters who seemed to welcome their own destruction. The battle for Earth began exactly as Morrison had planned. The alien fleet approached the planet expecting to find a small defensive force that would be quickly overwhelmed. Instead, they encountered a coordinated defense network that had turned the entire inner solar system into a killing field. Hidden weapons opened fire from asteroids, moons, and orbital platforms that the aliens had not detected. Burke commanded the mobile defense fleet, striking at enemy formations from unexpected directions and disappearing before return fire could be coordinated. His ships used every trick human military science had developed, from electronic warfare to psychological operations designed to break enemy morale. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting not just human ships, but the accumulated military wisdom of an entire species. Chang's technological breakthroughs had given human forces weapons equal to anything the aliens possessed, but more importantly, they had shown humanity how to think like their enemies. Understanding alien psychology had proven more valuable than understanding alien technology, allowing humans to predict enemy movements and exploit their predictable responses to tactical situations. The battle raged for 72 hours, the same amount of time the aliens had originally given humanity to surrender. When it ended, the Zephyrian Confederation had ceased to exist as an effective military force. Of the 30,000 ships that had attacked Earth, fewer than 5,000 survived to retreat toward their home territories. The survivors carried with them a new understanding of what humanity represented, not just another species to be conquered, but a force of nature that could not be stopped. Morrison stood once again at his command center window, watching the wreckage of alien ships burn in Earth's atmosphere. The war was far from over, but the tide had turned decisively in humanity's favor. The species that had conquered 800 worlds had finally met an enemy they could not defeat through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They had encountered something they had never faced before: the accumulated military wisdom of a species that had spent 5,000 years perfecting the art of warfare. 8 months after the first alien ships appeared in Earth's sky, the war had changed completely. Admiral Jake Morrison reviewed intelligence reports from across the galaxy, watching the systematic collapse of the Zephyrian Confederation. Humanity had not only survived the attempted extermination, but had taken the fight to alien homeworlds. The hunters had become the hunted, and the Zephyrians were learning what it meant to face an enemy that refused to quit. Commander Alex Torres led humanity's first deep space invasion fleet, striking at alien supply depots and communication centers throughout their territory. His reconnaissance missions had revealed the locations of all 12 Zephyrian homeworlds, giving human forces the intelligence they needed to plan operations that would have been impossible just months earlier. Torres smiled as he read the latest reports. 3 more alien species had withdrawn from the Confederation, too afraid to continue fighting humans. Captain Ryan Burke commanded a fleet of captured alien vessels operated by human crews, using enemy technology against its creators with devastating effectiveness. The Zephyrians had built their ships for overwhelming firepower in traditional battles, but human crews used them for hit-and-run attacks that kept enemy forces constantly off balance. Burke's tactical innovations had become required study at every military academy in human space. Dr. Lisa Grant watched her psychological warfare campaign achieve results she had never imagined possible. The concept of individual freedom had spread through alien civilizations like wildfire, causing internal revolts that were tearing the Confederation apart from within. Grant had weaponized human culture itself, proving that ideas could be more powerful than any energy weapon or particle beam. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Hayes had evolved from infiltration specialist to strategic planner, using his intimate knowledge of alien psychology to predict enemy movements with uncanny accuracy. The Zephyrians had become so demoralized by constant defeats that many of their commanders were making decisions based on fear rather than sound military doctrine. Hayes exploited those weaknesses ruthlessly. Dr. Peter Chang had perfected humanity's reverse-engineered technology to the point where human ships were now superior to their alien counterparts. More importantly, Chang had discovered the Zephyrians' critical biological weakness. They had evolved in controlled environments for so long that they could not adapt to the stress of prolonged warfare. Extended combat caused complete psychological breakdown in alien crews. General Paul Stevens prepared for what everyone thought was impossible: the invasion of alien homeworlds. Human forces had moved from desperate defense to strategic offense in less than a year, demonstrating the kind of adaptability that had allowed humanity to survive every challenge their violent history had presented. Stevens planned to offer alien populations the same choice the Zephyrians had given humanity: surrender or extinction. Major Kate Russell had become something of a legend among both human and alien forces. Her fighter squadron appeared wherever the fighting was heaviest, striking decisive blows that often determined the outcome of entire battles. Enemy crews had started surrendering rather than face pilots who seemed to welcome death in combat, a psychological advantage that proved more valuable than any technological superiority. The Zephyrians attempted one final massive assault on Earth, bringing every remaining ship in their fleet for a desperate attack on the human homeworld. High Commander Vexthal, still imprisoned in human custody, watched the reports with growing despair as his species committed the last of their military resources to a battle they could not win. The Confederation was fracturing, but Zephyrian leadership refused to accept defeat. Morrison had prepared for this moment throughout the entire war. Earth's defense network had been expanded and improved using captured alien technology, turning the entire solar system into a fortress that could withstand any assault. But the Admiral's real weapon was not technological. It was the accumulated military wisdom of a species that had learned to think of entire star systems as battlefield terrain. Dr. Rachel Kim's psychological operations had reached peak effectiveness, broadcasting subliminal messages designed specifically for each alien species in the Confederation. Human culture had proven to be a powerful weapon against civilizations that had never encountered concepts like individual liberty, democratic government, or the idea that some things were worth dying for. Enemy morale collapsed wherever these broadcasts penetrated. Captain Maria Gonzalez commanded humanity's most ambitious operation: simultaneous raids on Zephyrian homeworlds designed to cripple their ability to continue the war. Her fleet used captured alien navigation data to strike at targets the enemy thought were safe, proving that nowhere in the galaxy was beyond human reach. Gonzalez had volunteers for missions everyone knew were one-way trips. Dr. Nathan Wright made the discovery that sealed the Zephyrians' fate. Their species had been genetically modified centuries ago to eliminate aggressive tendencies, making them excellent at administration and logistics, but terrible at actual warfare. They had conquered other worlds through technological superiority, but when faced with an enemy that could match their technology, they had no reserves of fighting spirit to draw upon. The final battle for Earth became a masterpiece of human tactical doctrine. Morrison did not try to stop the alien fleet in a single engagement, instead allowing them to penetrate the solar system, while activating hidden defenses that turned their advance into a nightmare of coordinated attacks from multiple directions. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting not just human ships but the entire inner solar system itself. Burke's fleet struck from the asteroid belt, while orbital platforms opened fire from concealed positions around Earth. Russell's fighters appeared, from nowhere, to target command ships and communications arrays. Hayes used his knowledge of alien psychology to predict where enemy commanders would retreat, positioning human forces to intercept them before they could escape. The battle demonstrated everything humans had learned about warfare over their long and violent history. They used deception, misdirection, and psychological operations combined with superior tactics to achieve victory against overwhelming odds. The Zephyrians were not just outfought, but completely outthought by an enemy that approached warfare as both science and art. Chang's technological innovations proved decisive when human ships began using weapons that the aliens could not defend against. Captured Zephyrian technology had been improved by human engineers who understood that the best weapon was not necessarily the most powerful, but the most unexpected. Enemy shields designed to stop energy weapons were useless against kinetic projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. Admiral Susan Clark coordinated Earth's home defense fleet during the final alien assault, demonstrating tactical brilliance that would be studied at military academies for generations. Her forces used every advantage human military doctrine had developed, from electronic warfare to coordinated attacks that overwhelmed enemy targeting systems. Clark's victory marked the end of Zephyrian expansion in the galaxy. Torres led the pursuit of retreating alien forces, ensuring that survivors would carry word of humanity's military capabilities back to their homeworlds. The message was simple and direct. Humans could reach any target in the galaxy, and they would not hesitate to use that capability against anyone who threatened Earth or its colonies. When the battle ended, the Zephyrian Confederation had effectively ceased to exist. Of the 12 species that had formed the alliance, only 4 remained committed to the war effort. The others had either surrendered, retreated to distant sectors, or were dealing with internal revolts inspired by human concepts of freedom and self-determination. Morrison stood in his command center, watching the last alien ships disappear into hyperspace. The species that had conquered 800 worlds in 5,000 years had been defeated by humans in less than a year. They had made the fatal mistake of underestimating not just human technology or tactics, but human nature itself. The war was not over, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. 1 year after the first alien ships appeared above Earth, High Commander Vexthul sat in his human detention cell, watching news broadcasts that documented the complete collapse of everything he had once ruled. The Zephyrian Confederation no longer existed, its member species scattered across the galaxy or incorporated into humanity's growing alliance of free worlds. Vexthul had lived to see his civilization die, and he finally understood the price of underestimating an enemy. Captain Maria Gonzalez led humanity's liberation campaign, offering former Confederation worlds a choice their previous masters had never given them: freedom to rebuild their societies or continued resistance leading to extinction. Most alien populations chose freedom, embracing concepts of individual liberty and democratic government that human culture had spread throughout the galaxy. Gonzalez commanded not conquerors but liberators. Admiral Jake Morrison oversaw the establishment of humanity's first interstellar defense network, a system designed to prevent any future alien confederation from threatening Earth or its allies. The network incorporated the best human and alien technology, staffed by mixed crews that included former enemies, who had chosen cooperation over annihilation. Morrison had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history: peace through strength. Dr. Lisa Grant became Earth's first ambassador to liberated worlds, helping former Confederation species establish independent governments based on human principles of self-determination. Her psychological warfare techniques had evolved into diplomatic tools that promoted understanding between species that had never experienced true freedom. Grant was building not an empire, but a voluntary alliance of free peoples. Captain Ryan Burke retired from active military service to establish the Space Combat Academy, an institution dedicated to teaching human tactical doctrine to allied species. Burke's innovations in asymmetric warfare had become the foundation for a new kind of military science, one based on adaptability and creative thinking, rather than technological superiority. His students would ensure that no future aggressor could threaten the galaxy's freedom. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Hayes had become humanity's leading expert on alien psychology, using his knowledge to help former enemies integrate into human society. Many Zephyrians had requested asylum on Earth, preferring to live among the people who had defeated them, rather than face the chaos consuming their homeworlds. Hayes helped these refugees understand what it meant to be free. Dr. Peter Chang continued his research into alien technology, but his focus had shifted from weapons development to peaceful applications that could benefit all species in the Alliance. Chang's discoveries had made interstellar travel faster and safer, allowing trade and cultural exchange between worlds that had never communicated before the war. Technology that had once been used for conquest now served to build bridges. General Paul Stevens commanded the joint forces that dealt with the few remaining Zephyrian holdouts. Two alien species had chosen continued resistance over surrender, believing they could still achieve victory through traditional military means. Stevens was systematically eliminating these threats, demonstrating that humanity's mercy had limits and that extinction remained an option for those who refused to learn. Major Kate Russell had become the symbol of human military excellence. Her tactical innovations studied by pilots throughout the galaxy. Russell's fighter doctrine emphasized individual initiative and creative problem-solving, qualities that had proven decisive in humanity's victory over the Confederation. Her students learned that the best weapon was not technology but the human spirit. Vexthul reflected on his species' fatal miscalculation as he watched reports of the final Zephyrian strongholds falling to human-led forces. The Confederation had encountered 847 species before meeting humanity, conquering each one using the same method. Overwhelming technological superiority, followed by demands for surrender. Every previous enemy had chosen survival over resistance. Commander Alex Torres led exploration missions to distant galaxies, carrying a message that would become humanity's calling card throughout the universe. The message was simple, but profound. Humans came in peace and offered friendship to all who would live free, but to those who would enslave others they offered extinction instead. Torres was expanding humanity's reach beyond their home galaxy. Dr. Rachel Kim had documented the psychological factors that led to humanity's victory, creating a comprehensive analysis of why humans succeeded where other species failed. Her research showed that humanity's unique evolutionary history of constant warfare had created a species capable of extraordinary adaptation under extreme pressure. Kim's work would help future generations understand their own nature. Admiral Susan Clark commanded the new Galactic Peacekeeping Force, a joint military organization dedicated to protecting free worlds from future threats. Clark's forces included representatives from dozens of species, united by shared commitment to the principles humanity had fought to defend. The galaxy had never seen such cooperation between different forms of life. Dr. Nathan Wright studied the biological and cultural factors that had made the Zephyrians vulnerable to human tactics. His research revealed that genetic modification designed to eliminate aggressive tendencies had created a species capable of administration, but incapable of effective resistance when challenged by determined opponents. Wright's findings became a cautionary tale about the dangers of abandoning natural selection. The final tally of the war shocked everyone who studied it. Of the 12 species that had formed the Zephyrian Confederation, 4 had joined humanity's alliance, 3 had retreated to distant corners of the galaxy, 2 had undergone complete social revolution, 2 had been systematically eliminated, and the Zephyrians themselves faced extinction with fewer than 10 million survivors scattered across refugee camps. Morrison met with Vexthul one final time, before the former alien commander was transferred to a rehabilitation facility on a liberated world. The Zephyrian leader had requested this meeting, wanting to understand how his species had made such a catastrophic error in judgment. Morrison explained that the Confederation's mistake was not tactical or technological, but philosophical. Aliens had encountered 847 species that chose survival over freedom when faced with overwhelming force. Humanity was different not because of superior weapons or numbers, but because of their fundamental nature. Humans preferred death to slavery, a psychological characteristic that made them impossible to conquer through traditional means. This difference had proven more decisive than any military advantage. Vexthul acknowledged that his species had failed to understand what they were truly fighting. The Zephyrians had faced not just human ships and weapons, but the essence of what made humanity unique in the galaxy. That essence had proven stronger than their entire confederation, more durable than their most advanced technology, and more dangerous than their most powerful weapons. Morrison's final report on the war summarized its ultimate lesson for future generations. The conflict had demonstrated that technological superiority without understanding of enemy psychology was worthless, that numbers without adaptability were meaningless, and that conquest without legitimacy was impossible to maintain. Humanity had won not through might, but through something far more powerful: the refusal to accept defeat. The galaxy entered a new age under human leadership, but it was leadership based on example rather than force. Former enemies became allies. Oppressed populations achieved freedom, and species that had never imagined independence began governing themselves. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy, but had liberated it from those who believed might made right. 5 years after the war ended, human exploration vessels launched toward distant galaxies, carrying the same message Torres had delivered throughout local space. They sought not conquest but contact, not subjects but allies, not empire but understanding. The species that had refused to surrender their freedom had become the guardians of freedom for countless others. The final scene of humanity's greatest war showed Earth's children departing for the stars, carrying with them the lesson their species had learned through centuries of conflict: that some principles were worth any sacrifice, that freedom was more precious than life itself, and that a people willing to die for their beliefs could never truly be defeated. The galaxy had been transformed, not by human weapons but by human values, and those values would spread to every corner of the universe.